Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Alex Marcolini, the host of the Lifestyle Balance podcast. And this is Nick Esnari, co-host. And today is episode 33. Really special guest today, also a fellow podcast host, so that's awesome. And we'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll go from there.
Amazing. I'm Samir Mourani. I am a serial entrepreneur. At least I like to think of myself as that. Sometimes I wonder why I do it. But I'm also a podcaster, the host of the Gent podcast. I'm also a speaker. I'm in the men's lifestyle space, a content creator. I do it all.
Yep.
Just as many irons in the fire as you can possibly get in the hopes that something will stick.
Awesome. Great intro. If you guys haven't seen him before, listen, Gent's pod I've been following it for quite some time now. It's been pretty cool.
Thank you.
And they create a really cool production. So check it out if you haven't already. We'll obviously be linking it all and so forth. But let's go right into it. So Samir, did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Samir, okay. When did you get into the space or become a host to start off in the first part?
I kind of stumbled into it. So
Okay.
being in the men's lifestyle space and in the media space with Gent's Post, the publication,
Yeah.
we get a lot of access to celebrities
Yes.
coming through Toronto. And Toronto's a hub, obviously, right?
Exactly.
So people just are always here. And somebody had reached out from an agency saying, "Hey, Samir, Russell Peters is coming to Toronto. Would you want to interview him?" And I was just like, yeah, absolutely. Virtual 30 minutes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I'd always ideated and wanted to put together a podcast. But, when you don't know how to even start that.
Like us, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of thinking about it. It'd be really cool, but maybe one day. And then as soon as I finished that call about confirming Russell coming in or doing the interview, I thought to myself, if there was ever an opportunity or ever a moment to start a podcast, it's with Russell Peters as your first guest.
That's amazing.
Right? Yeah. So I called them back and I said, "Can we get him on camera?" And they're like, "Oh, well, what do you need?" I'm like, "I just need about 45 minutes of his time." And they go, "Where's the studio?" I'm like, "Where is he going to be?" I say, "Downtown." I tell them my studio's downtown. Right? I don't have a studio. I don't have a videographer. I don't have the first idea of how to start a podcast, run a podcast.
Yeah.
They're like, "Yeah, I think we can make it work. Yeah, we'll have some time." So as soon as I hung up, I was like, great. Now I got to go find a videographer. I got to go find a studio. I got to figure out how to run a podcast, how to start a podcast. It all works. But I'd been listening to podcasts for a long time.
Cool.
So I already had this idea of what to expect from creating one.
Yeah.
And then we ended up partnering with a studio downtown. We told them Russell Peters was coming in. They're like, "You can have the space for free." We just want Russell Peters in our studio.
Yeah, for sure.
Found a video. Exactly.
Yeah.
Found a videographer. Russell showed up about 2 hours late. I thought we were already a couple grand deep into it at this point, right?
Wow.
Like, is he even going to show? Right?
Wow.
And then he finally shows up. Turned out he had a really long night the night before. And we were just like, all right, let's get this rolling. And we hit record. And he's like, "What is this, by the way?"
Yeah.
Like, I guess he didn't even really know.
Yeah.
And I told him.
This is first, I guess?
Yeah, well, like this is as soon as he sat down. He's like, "So what exactly is this?" We're already recording. And I explained to him, like the idea behind Gent's Post and Gent's Talk is redefining masculinity. And right away, he got like his guard up. He's like, "Well, what does that mean?"
It's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah, it's a very like if you don't know, it could go down very different paths. And then I started explaining to him. I said, this is just an idea of changing the narrative around conversations for men, mental health, wellness, self-development. We're not talking about the stuff you see in the news that are very polarizing and try to get people upset.
Stereotypical.
Yeah, this is just how do we change the conversation that, you could still be a strong, powerful, confident man, but also express when you're having a bad day, when you're dealing with something hard or traumatizing in life, or you just lost your job, or you just broke up with your partner, or whatever the case may be. Things that we all go through and makes us feel like shit. Can I swear?
Yeah.
Makes us feel like shit sometimes, and then how do instead of just burying it and moving forward, it's like, how do we actually deal with it? 10 minutes into the conversation, Russell turns to me and he goes, the pandemic was the darkest days of his life.
Wow.
Because he had lost his ability to see his son. Him and his ex had split up.
Yes.
Suddenly, here is Russell Peters, a legendary comedian, sitting inside a 12,000 square foot mansion. Money, cars, jewelry, fame, you name it, None of it mattered because he couldn't see his son. And he's like, in that moment, I realized everything I had didn't matter. And that's when I realized I was in a dark place. And for someone like Russell Peters to open up to a complete stranger, just met me 10 minutes earlier.
Wow.
Right?
And be able,
Yeah, that was lightning in the bottle. And then the podcast, I knew in that moment the podcast could actually become a thing. Wow. And since then, it's just taken off between, now we've put out, I think 92 episodes.
Wow.
We publish weekly. We're on board Air Canada. They reached out. I thought it was a scam. Like, don't call me. This is fake. I'm not giving you my SIN number. But the exec there turned out to be really nice and had a sense of humor.
Wow.
But he called back and was like, we want to get this on board. I walked into the meeting ready to pitch them on why they should have us on board their flights. And as soon as I sat down, before I could open my laptop, he goes, what do I need to do to convince you to put Gent's Talk on our planes?
Wow. So that changed your perspective.
100%. It validated what we were doing, because in our mind, we were like, we're just creating something hoping that it sticks.
It's gonna,
But seeing it resonate with people, right? Seeing these public personas come into the studio and strip all of that away and just be human, I think really resonates with a lot of people. And that's why they take to the podcast, right? They come for one guest because they like a Russell Peters, they like a James Blunt, they like this Olympian or this entrepreneur, and they see the conversation and go, oh, you know what? Like, there's something here. And then, now we're on board Air Canada. We have seasons 1 through 5 are on board.
Wow.
We've generated just shy of 30 million impressions from the podcast, like just insane numbers.
Congrats.
And thank you very much.
Yes.
And Gent's Talk is now in the top 5% globally on Spotify.
Wow.
It's a lot of work. Like, it all sounds fantastic.
For sure. But
it's a lot of work.
No one
you
sees
guys know.
Right?
Like, no one sees the hours that go behind it. The guest scheduling, the guest rescheduling, the post-production. Like we were talking right before we hit record. This part is the easiest part.
The best.
Exactly. This is the part where you get to just lay back, shoot the shit, have a fun conversation. And then as soon as the person gets up and leaves, then you're like,
that's when the hard work starts.
Like, I got to edit. I got to make sure everything's on point. I hope the audio got picked up properly. Like, all sorts of things.
I'm sure you've had your fun share with audio too.
Oh my God, man. There's been times where the audio just cuts off for 10 minutes in the middle of the conversation. You have to like somehow go back, and you got to remember, like, you only have these people for an hour.
Limited time. It's like, you got to make it perfect.
They're coming through the city, so it's not like they live down the street. You got to. So I try to take every precaution. I work with great people, but every so often something messes up.
Always.
It doesn't, a wire is too loose.
Never fails to happen. Wow.
And how did like the topic of like talking about like masculinity like come up? Like when did you say like what made you think to talk about that?
So I grew up a very prototypical guy. If I ever felt anything that wasn't anger, I would bury it. Right? Wasn't my father's fault. It wasn't my parents' fault. It was just the society around me, the environment, the culture. 100%. Everything was just like, you know what, if you're having a bad day, you be quiet. You don't talk about it. If you're on the verge of breaking down into tears because, you know what, like life has really overwhelmed you and, you know, you don't know what to do about it, you don't. You hold back, which is funny because, well, not funny. It's kind of sad, actually. Tears are not, you know, an indication of strength or weakness. It's actually your body's defense mechanism. The reason you cry is to release the toxins, the stress toxins in your system. That's the body's natural way of getting rid of stress.
Wow.
And that's why after you have a cry, you're just like, wow, I actually feel better.
Yeah.
That's why.
You do.
So when you let it out. So gents, there's a scientific reason behind it. Don't be so macho about it. But I was the guy, right? I was the guy that was shut down for so long, and I rarely expressed emotions unless I was like happy and laughing. I was angry. It was either one or the other. A couple of weeks before the lockdowns happened in Toronto, my ex-wife and I, we were married at the time, split up. She packed her bags and left. And I was devastated, but I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what words to use to express that I needed help. I didn't know how to reconcile the emotions that were boiling to the surface. And that's when I was like, all right, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go distract myself. went out to bars, went out to clubs, went drinking, went partying, did
what
everything.
every guy would do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything except for dealing with what was going on inside.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic happened and the lockdowns happened. And then there I was sitting inside of this condo in Toronto thinking,
It's just lingering with you.
yeah, I can't watch sports. No, and they all shut down. Can't go out. Can't see my friends.
Yeah.
Right. I had nothing to do. So I literally sat there just with myself.
Wow.
And I was scared. I was just like, where the fuck am I? Right. Like, who am I? Where am I? What is all these emotions that are just like boiling to the surface? I can't contain them. I would have days where I'd just be sitting on the couch for hours, just staring at a wall in my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like having conversations with myself. It was just really dark days for me.
Yeah.
And it required a lot of work to overcome that. And I was lucky because I had reached out to a guy in my life that I didn't really have a strong bond with him. But for some reason, I thought, you know what? If there was someone I could talk to, maybe it'd be him.
Wow.
And I, called him and I go, I was like, how's life? How's the pandemic treating you? All of these things. And then before I could really jump into it, he goes, Samir, because of the pandemic, I don't actually know if I can keep making money. And I'm very insecure about that. And I'm also in the process of potentially breaking up. So he's like, I'm really feeling it.
Yeah.
My shoulders just like dropped.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So this is what it's like to have an authentic, vulnerable conversation with another person.
Yeah.
Right? And in that moment, I immediately learned that expressing your vulnerability and your weaknesses doesn't make you less of a man. It doesn't make you unmasculine or anything like that.
No.
If anything, it shows strength because you're willing to go through the hard parts.
Yeah.
And then my business partner called me one day, a few months later, saying he wanted to start a men's lifestyle publication. And was I interested in joining him? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Like, I don't know the first thing about media, but why the fuck not?
Yeah.
It was a pandemic. You couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. Like, who cares, right?
Keeps you busy.
Yeah, exactly. And in that first conversation that we had, we were talking about like, yeah, it'd be so cool to cover what LeBron James wore at the game last night and where to travel and all these things and where to eat. And then we're like, but you know what? Life's sucked recently.
Yeah.
It's been hard. Why don't we talk about that too? Why don't we talk about mental health, grooming? If you're a guy that's balding, you guys know guys in your life that are balding.
Yeah.
That's got to be a very insecure place to be in.
For sure.
Right? Because you automatically think, okay, I'm losing my hair. Does that make me unattractive?
Yeah.
I'm also losing my hair. Does that make me someone who's not all of a sudden, like girls won't look at me the same way? Whatever the case may be.
Insecure at all. Yeah.
So why don't we have conversations about that? The real stuff that matter to guys. The conversations and the things that we search up at night when we're away from our friends that we want to know about, but we don't openly talk about, right? And then that's how Gent's post was formed. And then fast forward, Gent's talk was formed when Russell Peters showed up.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a wild journey, but it all basically comes from the fact that I went through something that traumatized me to the point where I realized I can't live this way anymore.
You have to talk about it.
Yeah. And then I started to think to myself, you know what? How many other guys are feeling this way?
Yeah.
How many other guys are feeling this way but don't talk about it? How many other guys are feeling this way and don't even know how to talk about it?
Exactly.
They want to. They want the outlet but don't know where to start.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I think a lot of guys do. And just to give some context to that, if you don't mind, like, it's funny when you say that because, not funny, but it's just coincidental because recently with COVID as well, when we were going to school, we went to school together, and at our school, there was always an event every year tailored towards females about mental health and a conversation, and it was a whole 2-day event and so forth. And so it was actually my initiative and a good friend of mine to pitch the idea of the male side of things and to talk about mental health. And, when there's like 70, 80 guys in a room who are all that stereotypical male who don't talk about their feelings, don't talk about their mental health, what's going on beside them, and COVID just happened, it was crazy. But it was an unforgettable evening, and we were able to create a legacy that continues every year.
Amazing.
And so to see that, thank you, to see that after the pandemic in similarity to you is just, it's so true. It really is. The way that men feel.
It takes one person, one guy to just go, you know what, we need to start this conversation.
Exactly.
And you meet another guy who goes, yeah, you know what, I agree with that. It takes one to just take that initial step, show some courage, and say,
And take act.
yeah, I believe that this is important for us,
Yeah.
for men.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And so have you found now with, you were saying 91, 92 episodes now, is it? Like between every single guest, obviously I'm sure they have their different opinion on it, their different way of it. What was the most, I guess, inspiring situation that you were?
Two of them. The first one was with a Chef Devin.
Cool. He's actually coming on.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Next one.
Nice.
Awesome.
Chef
Yeah.
Dev.
Shout out.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Incredible. Oh, you're going to have
Yeah.
such a great conversation. Oh, I'm
Awesome.
so happy you're doing that.
Yeah,
He's
thank you.
amazing. He's wonderful.
Cool.
I'm actually so happy that
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, not at all. Yeah, no, I'm so happy. Dev turned to me and said, I didn't know that it was okay to not be okay.
Wow.
And I was just like, you know that emoji with the head exploding?
Yeah.
That was me. Yeah, that was me. I was just thinking, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if all you're taught is one way, you don't know what the other is.
100%.
So that was one. The second one, and this was more validating as a host.
Okay.
James Blunt, the Grammy-winning artist, world phenomenon,
Wow.
the whole thing. As soon as we stopped recording, he turned to me and said, you know, in all my years doing interviews, I have never been able to have a conversation as James Blunt, the human, and not James Blunt, the artist.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, that was so powerful because
sure.
it means that we're succeeding in creating a space for these incredible individuals to have meaningful, authentic conversations.
Yep.
And that part is super important to me because I want my guests to feel safe and comfortable talking about the things that matter to them.
Yeah.
And there's so many lessons I can pull out from the conversations.
Sure.
I think even the guys that come in, Jonathan Osorio actually is one of them. Plays
Yes.
for Toronto FC,
Yes.
plays for Team Canada.
Great player.
When he came in, the agent that was with him turned to me and said, listen, Jonathan is a bit more on the serious side. He's going to be very business minded.
Yep.
Conversation is just going to be like a regular sports interview. And halfway through the podcast, he turns to me and goes, you know, no matter how well I played, I would give it 150%. I would score goals. I would do well. I still couldn't get everyone to love me. And he's like, that ate away at me.
Wow.
And here's a World Cup athlete.
Yeah.
Plays for Team Canada.
Yeah.
Plays for Toronto FC.
Yeah.
One of our best players saying, I struggled because of that. Roy Woods, an OVO artist.
Amazing
Incredible.
singer.
Yeah.
Holy.
Said
Yeah.
to me, how do I balance making a living? How do I balance being a good father and also making a living in an industry that promotes violence, machoism, substance abuse?
Wow.
Like, he's like, how do I balance these two contradictions?
Wow.
I go home and I want to nurture and protect my kid from the world. And then I go out and I sing and I make money in an industry where 90% of the people in there are just talking about guns and violence and drugs. Yeah. So it highlights that there's so many contradictions that we live in and that everyone is just trying to find their way through it.
Yeah.
And what you see on the surface is never what's actually happening beneath.
100%. And I think it's really interesting to see how you guys are able to showcase people from such widely drastic different industries at such a high level, and to showcase that they all see it from a different perspective but have the same issue as a male.
Absolutely.
It shows like that they're human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And we all feel it. Right.
Yeah.
The fame, the fortune.
Yeah.
And the comment sections are always like, oh, why are you crying? You make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Especially with Osorio.
Yeah.
There was a ton of comments like that. Why is this $1 million soccer player complaining?
Wow.
But people don't understand the negativity.
Yeah.
Right. Like, just imagine you open up your socials and all you see are negative comments from people. Half the time you turn on your socials, you're like, did anybody say anything nice?
Yeah.
Imagine if people are saying negative things.
Yep.
Like, how much that would impact a person. And I think athletes, people, anybody with a public persona, I think that part sometimes gets overlooked because we think the fame should automatically make all that feel better.
For sure.
Which is not the case.
For sure. That's so true. Wow. I also noticed that you did recently a TED Talk.
Yeah, TEDx Talk.
Yeah, that's
It was
so cool. I
incredible.
saw that on your LinkedIn, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow. How did that come about?
Good question. About a year, so in January 2023,
Yeah.
I kept thinking to myself, okay, what is it that I really want to do? And the podcast gives me a platform to have conversations, but I also want to, I want to inspire other men to have these conversations.
For sure.
And sometimes it means putting yourself out there. So I posted a story on my Instagram with a photo of a book called Talk Like Ted.
Okay.
And the idea was I'm manifesting what I want. I'm putting it out there to the world. This is what I want.
Wow.
And then as soon as I put that out there, conversations started rolling. And I had an opportunity to do a TED Talk in the middle of 2023. But the notice between when I was told I can do it and when the talk was like 2 weeks. And I'm like, there's no way I can prepare for this, and I'm not going to wing it.
Yeah, you don't want it to go.
Yeah, like I'm not having my first TED Talk.
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
So then the opportunity came up to do it again in January of this year. And it literally was maybe 5 or 6 days apart from when I posted that story a year earlier, which was really cool. And I prepared for months for this talk, and it involved me putting myself out there in a way I've never put myself out there before. They haven't released the video yet. I'm hoping that they do that soon, but
Cool.
It was an incredible experience. I had people come up to me saying, you know, this has changed the way they look at the topic of men's health and mental health. And that's ultimately what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
And this isn't to take away from the importance of mental health for society in general, for women, for children, etc. It's just that we've struggled for so long and have been told for so long, don't talk about these things. Don't have these conversations. And then we see, you know, we see the rise in, I don't want to call him an influencer because he's certainly not, but you see the rise in popularity with guys like Andrew Tate. And other people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I get asked sometimes, why do you think Andrew Tate's so popular?
Yeah.
And I'd struggle to give an answer because I'm like, I'm trying to understand what is it that appeals? Because for me,
Yeah.
I see right through it.
Yeah.
But then I have conversations with some guys who are just like, nah, man, he's speaking the truth. He's saying what we've been thinking, all these things. So I'm like, I'm trying to understand it. And then finally, I started thinking to myself, if for your entire life, you've been told, shut up, man up. Your life sucks, deal with it.
Yeah.
And you don't know any kind of reception to your emotions other than that. Finally, a guy comes along and goes, I see you. I hear you. Your life does suck. I've been there. You're all of a sudden thinking, oh, finally, someone understands me. Someone's validating me.
Yeah.
And then he goes, this is how you're going to get out of this. Sign up for this course. Spend this money. Do this. And his socials are littered with, you know, fancy cars, money everywhere, beautiful women, a lifestyle that you aspire for, that we all aspire for. We want to live a life of luxury and travel and adventure.
Sure. Who wouldn't?
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So you see that. You see him speaking directly to the version of you that's been shut down by everyone else in society. Of course you're going to want to listen to him. But then when you actually listen to the messaging, what is he telling you? He's not telling you to work through all the shit that you've been dealing with.
No.
It's just like, no, go out, make money, fuck everybody else.
Yeah.
Is that really?
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to live a healthy lifestyle like that.
No.
It's all going to come crashing down. I've had conversations with millionaires
Yeah.
who are just like, the money doesn't matter. I promise you, the money doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You will still feel like shit unless you figure your shit out.
Yes. 100%. And a lot, like, to go off that, a lot of people say who are millionaires who have been successful is the way to be successful, the way to get to where they are is you cannot focus on the money. You have to focus on the process, the failing, learning through mistakes, learning through a situation. If you're focusing on just the end goal, it's a lot harder to get
It's
there.
a lot harder. And imagine if all you think about is that end goal and you don't learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
If you treat your business the way you treat yourself, your business would fail.
Yes.
If you neglect your business the way you neglect your mental health and your wellness, your business would fail. The same approach these people give to their businesses, where they're constantly looking after it, researching it, making sure everything is fine. If you've got a customer business, making sure your customers are happy and all those things. That same energy and dedication and focus, do that internally for a little bit
And honestly, yeah.
and do it honestly,
Yeah.
and you'll see so many differences in your life.
It's so true. It's so true. It's it's really cool to see that you guys are focusing on that, because I feel like
'Cause no one talks about it.
yeah, no one, locally or on a global aspect. I feel like it's at a stage now where more men are actually understanding it. You know, our age or younger, like more, it's becoming more understandable. Versus a couple years ago, pre-pandemic and so forth, it was a stereotype. It was like if you acted a different way, people looked at you like you were weak in a sense.
And they say like, be a man.
Yeah, the word. Yeah,
It's funny because if you were to tell someone, I spoke to a therapist, I spoke to a counselor,
yeah.
I think you're crazy.
Yeah.
I think you're wild. And then people go out there and they love shows like The Sopranos when Tony Soprano talked to a therapist. And it's funny because in that show, he comments about how that's actually helping him.
Yeah.
So like we have this misconception of therapy, whether that's speaking to an actual therapist or you and I having this conversation right now is therapeutic in its own way.
100%.
Right? Like just having conversation with your buddies.
Yeah.
And when was the last time you had an authentic conversation with your buddies?
Yeah.
Like a real one. You know, like when things when talks get deep and then afterwards you're
long
like, wow, that was
hours.
nice.
Yeah.
That felt good.
Yeah.
I got some stuff off my chest. I learned a little more about my buddy.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you want those real relationships? Because then if they're surface level relationships 10 years later, 5 years later, 3 years later, they're going to fade. You'll be like, oh, it's like that relationship never existed.
Yeah. It was a flawed, yeah. It's so true. Like, I remember the first time I had a very deep conversation like that with a friend. And I remember that their reaction was like, why don't we talk like this more often? And when you hear that, you're like, why don't we? Why hasn't this happened before? It's just crazy.
And it
So true.
and it just makes you feel so much better.
Yeah, 100%. So to go more into your podcast, because it's absolutely amazing. What is the process like for you? I know we talked a little bit off camera, but like the process for you when you get a guest and at such a high caliber, just producing at such a big demand all the time, weekly. How does it feel? How does it happen?
It's a mix. So, excuse me. It's a mix of, in some cases, we seek out the guest, and in other cases, people come to us.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
No, go ahead. It happens.
Dry throat, man.
Yeah.
It's a mix of inbound and outbound.
Yeah.
We're at a point now where we're fortunate because we have relationships with Sony Music, Universal Music, Warner Music, Paramount, Amazon Prime. Like we've built relationships and trust with these brands to say, when you have talent coming through the city, put us on your radar. Reach out to us.
Cool.
And the reason that's important is because they also want to show their talent in a different way. They don't want to just do like when we get musicians coming through the city, especially, it's usually for a tour, they're promoting an album, a song, whatever the case may be. And by the time they come to the studio, they've had maybe 8 interviews. Yeah. And all 8 interviews, they get asked really lame, standard question. Yeah. Like, what's your favorite spot in Toronto to eat? You know, like, where do you shop? You know, what do you like about Toronto? Like, how many times are you going to answer that? Yeah. Then they come and they sit down in front of me and I go, how's life? Wow. Right? Like, when you thought, before you were this uber successful person, I guarantee there was a night in a hotel room, in your room, wherever, where you thought, this is not going to work.
100%.
And you were ready to quit. But you didn't. Why? What happened? Yeah. How did you decide to keep going forward? What's that lesson in there? Because there are people listening in any industry who are on the verge of quitting what they're doing and are just one more day away from achieving success, whatever that means to them. Yeah. But there's also a lesson in there of what happens when you're honest with yourself, right? Because to quit something, to get to a point where you've dedicated so much time and then decide you're going to quit on something, you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. Like, maybe this isn't for me. Yeah. Maybe I didn't do as good as I thought. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought. Yeah. I mean, imagine, I'm going to think of athletes because you've got a Gretzky jersey there. But athletes eventually get to a point where they're like, maybe I got to retire. Maybe I'm not good enough.
For sure.
Right? those conversations.
No, yeah.
What do you think those are like? Right? I had
Not easy.
They spent their whole career playing.
their whole lives.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like a lot of them suffer from post-career depression because they're like, I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah, that's all they are.
Since I was 7 years old, I've been on skates playing hockey. And I made it to the NHL, and I've won awards and titles and all these things. And now I'm only 38, 40 years old if you play that long.
Yeah.
You have the rest of your life in front of you, and you're like, I don't even know who I am or what do I do when I'm not getting ready to play hockey. And a lot of them struggle with that.
For sure.
Substance abuse. They blow their money on things. They get into debt, gambling, addiction, all these things. And that's why players' associations are emphasizing and putting so much resources into post-career support.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go get a degree in something. Go, come be a part of, an organization. Come be a part of the players' association. Something to keep them active so they're not just sitting idle because, an idle brain is terrible.
Yeah.
100%. It's kind of similar like when someone gets to an older age where they've done something for such a long time and you see like older people who just can't stop. They don't know how to stop. It's the same thing. They're just like, I have a grandfather who here, for example, like right now he's in the warehouse screwing chairs. He's over 85 years old.
Oh, wow.
He started the company. Yeah, he won't stop. It's the same thing. And some of the coworkers are here, we all say it's like, it's the best thing for his health because if he were to stop that, he wouldn't know what to do. His mind would go crazy. He's alone. He doesn't know who to talk to. So it's like an outlet for him.
100%.
It's
therapeutic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
He's probably got some wild stories.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get him on here one day.
Yeah.
Might not be so PG, but yeah. Awesome. And so what is probably the most eye-opening thing about the podcast in general that you take away from whether it's guests or just meeting certain people and having open access to, being on Air Canada now and stuff like that? What's something you've learned the most from it all?
What you see on the surface is never what's happening in reality.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to a lot of these people that I've had on the podcast. When you look at their socials, it's the highlight reel of their lives.
Yeah.
Right? It's the new album, it's the private jets, it's the awards, it's the money, it's the fame, it's all these things, right? They post a photo. I had JP Sachs come on, and he talked about how it's easy for him to be vulnerable online because he gets rewarded for it. He's got a fan base who will encourage him. So when he posts a photo or a video talking about a struggle of some kind, people in the hundreds and the thousands will comment and like and support him and say, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. This is great. We love it. But if, the average Joe goes and posts a photo or a video saying, hey, guys, like I'm struggling,
they put him down.
Put him down, right? And so it was interesting to learn how, when we see sometimes celebrities have these conversations out loud, yes, it motivates other people to have these conversations, but what we should also be doing is not just encouraging the celebrities to have these conversations, but we should be encouraging our friends, our network, our family members to have these conversations. And I think that's something that I've been learning. Like I said, at some point in this conversation, it's the contradictions that I'm learning the most from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. It's so true. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because we've had a lot of guests on, but we never had to really the opportunity to discuss it in a way of what is your actual conversation about? Like what comes from it versus, right. A lot of times we're talking to guests about what is their career like, what's their advice on their career for people who haven't been in it and so forth. But the actual person itself, which is like how you guys take over with your podcast and differentiate is very interesting. Yeah.
And do you have any like future goals or like anything in the future for your podcast? Like what's like something that's like what's like the next big thing that you're like working towards?
I think it's just getting it out in front of more people, really and truly. More conversations, more guests, more. I mean, it sucks to say, but a podcast is only as good as like it only matters if people are watching it,
100%.
right?
100%.
And that's the challenge. And I think getting it in front of more people is important.
Yeah.
Air Canada certainly helps in that regard, because now if you're flying for 8
sure.
hours, you could just literally watch it.
I'm going to do that next week when
Please
I go
do.
away.
Yeah.
I will.
And yeah, send us a photo.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll post it.
Please do.
It's sick.
Yeah, we'd love to. I think one of the other things that I want to get into personally
Yeah.
is the TED Talk did this for me, was more speaking.
Public speaking,
Yeah.
large audience.
Yeah.
Wow.
And even if it doesn't always have to be large audience, it could be small audiences, but just
Cool.
public speaking in the sense of having meaningful conversations,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I feel like, and I never try to position myself as an expert. I'm not an expert.
No, for sure.
I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Licensed to
accredited
be,
or
yeah.
licensed,
Yeah.
anything like that. And I've had people like say that to me, like, "Oh, well, you're not a therapist. What do you know?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
I'm figuring it out, just like every other person
sure.
on this planet. We're
There
just
shouldn't be
figuring
wrong
it
with
out.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I have lived experience. I've gone through my own share of challenges that have taught me what life is like if you stay in that space, and what life is like when you move away from it. And when you heal yourself and move away from it, I can promise you life is so much better. Holding on to that pain is not worth it. Yeah. It will not serve you. So public speaking in that regard, I think, is something that I definitely want to do. And I don't know, maybe write a book one day.
That's so cool.
I think I really just want to get into that space a lot more.
Yeah. Wow. And do you, I mean, not to put you on the spot or anything, but do you know what direction of public speaking, like type of audience you're focusing on? Like,
nothing in particular jumps to mind, but one of the things that I do want to speak to a lot more is mental health in the corporate world.
wow.
And I say that because I've worked in the corporate world. Sorry. I've worked in the corporate world. I've worked in the nonprofit world. And in both scenarios, your value is based off of how much sacrifice you're willing to
make.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, how many hours are you willing to put in? Are you willing to outwork the next person? And if you aren't, then you're not going to get a promotion. You're not going to.
Yeah.
And then your entire career trajectory is based on if you stay late, if you work the weekends, if you skip out on your kids' recitals, or if you skip out on your friend's birthday because you got to work late hours.
Wow.
Right? And the amount of people who are struggling with their mental health because of stuff like that is staggering.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why people are burning out. There's a reason why people are quitting. There's a reason why people are only giving the bare minimum, right? Nothing wrong with giving more than your bare minimum, but there has to be balance to it.
Yeah.
We have this notion where we idolize this, I call it hustle porn, right? It's like, if you're not hustling and working every hour of the day, you're lazy.
Yeah.
And I have negative self-talk with myself sometimes because of that.
For sure.
I'm like, I'm not working hard enough.
For sure.
But if you don't balance and give yourself a break, you're going to burn out. And then your body will physically shut down. And then what? You're in a hospital bed for 2-3 weeks because you can't get up. You can't function. And now you're really screwed.
Yeah.
Right? Because you didn't listen to your body and take a break. And so we glorify this idea of working long hours, doing a million different side hustles, make that money, do all these things. And we don't give ourselves breaks.
Yeah.
And we end up, like I said, we burn ourselves out. We struggle. We fall. We fail. Yeah. And it just piles on top of each other. The whole sleep when you're dead thing is so stupid.
No.
If you don't get, I think it was Matt Edwards. I think that's his name. He's a sleep expert.
Okay.
He was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I listened to that episode, and I was just blown away by the information that he shared about how important sleep is. One, it's like a natural steroid. If you go and get an operation or you're sick, what do you do? You sleep.
Exactly.
Right? And when you sleep, you feel great, right? You heal. That's when your body's actually going to work.
Yeah.
And working on healing your organs, healing your skin, healing everything. When you're dealing with a mental health issue, when you go to sleep, sometimes you'll feel better afterwards, or it'll help you
100%.
think through things in a clear mind.
Yeah.
So this idea of like, oh, I don't sleep, I'm a night owl, I only need 3 hours of sleep a night. Stupid.
No.
It's garbage. You're actually going to hurt yourself. The testosterone level of a man who sleeps about 6 hours a night or less is 30% higher. Or sorry, lower.
Lower, yeah.
Lower.
Oh,
Wow.
So why, for all those macho men out there who are like, oh, I don't need sleep.
I go to bed late. I wake up late. Yeah.
Your testosterone level is actually lower, gents.
That's crazy. Wow.
but I feel like society kind of like makes that happen. 'Cause like in Canada, it's so hustle bustle,
100%.
and there's never a time to just like relax.
But you're saying that based on the like,
Just like
current-
Toronto.
Yeah.
Toronto, it's just all go to work, come home, go to work, go home, go to work, come home.
Yep. People live to work.
Especially like in like that corporate world.
Yep.
Like when I think of like corporate people, I kind of think of like depressed people that don't want to really be there, and they're just miserable.
Yep. And don't get me wrong, working in the corporate world, entrepreneurship, all
sure.
that stuff, it's not for everybody.
No, 100%.
And some people
Everyone
can-
likes that. Or,
exactly.
Yeah,
And some people can have a very fulfilling, meaningful life working in the corporate world.
for sure.
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
Not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody needs to have 10 side hustles, right? Like I think we've overglorified that.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
gotten a little carried away. But there needs to be balance.
Yeah.
And if anything, for all the entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs out there, you actually work more as an entrepreneur.
Way more.
You get less breaks. So
There's no weekends.
no, just consider that.
Oh, that's so true. And to go off it, because I love the fact that you're like on quite a lot of your answers today have discussed the effect of balance in play. And obviously that's what we discuss a lot here, is whether it's career advice or in a mental health aspect. So whether it's you as a podcast host or you as a male, how do you balance your lifestyle?
I struggle with it, 100%. I try to make sure I get to the gym for me, or I do some sort of physical activity.
Okay.
And I love the sun, which is why I want to move out of Canada. I see it like 2 weeks out of the year. But I think for me, some sort of physical activity helps. I'm also a gamer. I love playing
Cool.
video games.
We do too, yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we talk about the pod. That's
Oh,
our
no way.
outlet.
That's
Yeah.
what- no, honestly, I have better conversations
Yeah.
playing video
It's
games
so
with my
true.
buddies
It's so
than if
true.
we hung out having wings or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like it's an opportunity to spend a few hours just chatting with your buddies
Yeah.
and then doing something fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like we'll turn on Warzone, we'll play, and we'll just literally sit there and play for a couple hours, and we'll have great conversations. But it's an outlet for me because it allows me to mentally detach from everything else I'm thinking of. Right? I'm thinking about the next guest. I'm thinking about this, that. But when I'm playing a video game, I gotta focus.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm gonna lose.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose.
No.
Right? So it's just like, all right. And so that's definitely a balance thing for me. For a long time, people were like, if you played video games, you were thought of as lazy,
Yeah.
criticized for it. But now there's actual evidence to show that playing video games is good for your social skills. Not too much, obviously. Like
sure.
too much of anything is bad.
Yeah.
But it's good for your social skills because you have to talk and communicate.
Exactly.
It's good if you want to learn how to strategize because you got to actually think about how to
And
play
quickly.
something quickly.
Yeah.
And it also teaches you how to, build relationships with your friends better, right?
For
like
sure.
if you're playing a team game of some kind and, everyone is doing their own thing, it gets fractured.
Yeah.
You got to learn compromise. You got to learn how to be like, all right, you take the lead. Now I'm
Yeah.
going to take the lead, whatever the case. But those skills are transferable when
To
you're
the real
doing
world.
Exactly. So that is another little pro. I don't know how we went down this rabbit hole, but playing video games, going to the gym, and anyone who tells you they like going to the gym, I think is lying because there are. I mean, let me rephrase that actually.
Okay.
I like going to the gym, but there are days where I hate going to the gym.
100% I agree.
Like I'll get up, get in the car, drive to the gym, and I'll sit in the parking lot for maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And then I'll get myself inside and I'll sit on a bench. I don't want to do this. Right. And it's just a grind, but that actually helps me build discipline. And then
100%.
after that workout, I'm like, I got through that. I did that. The hardest part is over.
Yeah. It's so true.
And it prepares you for even harder to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I find, so I was recently in Italy.
Nice.
And,
Where?
We landed in Rome and then went to Florence.
Beautiful.
We did Florence, Siena, Pisa, San Gimignano,
Beautiful.
Venice, Milan, Lake Como,
Nice.
and then Rome.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you did the whole tour.
Yeah.
That's sick.
I loved it.
Awesome.
The food, oh my God. Nothing like it here.
Where was your favorite place food-wise? If you had to choose.
Florence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd move to Florence if I could. I love Florence. I love the architecture,
the history,
the
the
history.
city,
It's
it's
the birthplace of the Renaissance. Come
Yeah.
on. So after I came back, I didn't adjust right away to the time difference. So I was waking up at 5.
Yeah.
And then I was awake, so I'd do emails, go to the gym for 6. By 8 o'clock, I pretty much did more work than I would do in a full day.
Wow.
And I loved it. And I found that actually gave me balance because I was like, okay, now I can not coast, but I can take it a little easier during the day. I don't feel stressed and wound up because I'm like, I have so much to do. I was able to do a lot more before anyone else was awake.
Wow.
But then I got sick and it threw all that out the window because now I'm like back to waking up at 8:30 and I'm just like, fuck.
Yeah.
I got to figure out how to wake up early again. But that waking up early, I think, has gave me a template for a better balance to my day.
Wow.
Because then I'm not working till 9 p.m.
Exactly.
10 p.m., right? I'm finishing at a reasonable hour. And especially as an entrepreneur, you don't want to be waking up at 8 working until 9 p.m.
No.
Sleep, rinse, and repeat. At some point you'll have to, but it's not sustainable.
No, it's so unhealthy too. Yeah. It's crazy. Wow. That's really cool. And to ask you as a podcast host, if there was one thing as your best advice to give to somebody who's starting a podcast, doesn't know where to start, what is it? What would you say?
It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
You're not going to go viral overnight. I've had people reach out to me who are social content creators who are very good at what they do and have made accounts blow up and everything like that, and would tell me, you can't script a podcast. They're very hard to immediately go viral on unless you get someone saying something controversial. Mm-hmm. And then you also just don't want to be that podcast.
No.
Right? Like you don't want to be known for getting people to say stupid shit.
Yeah.
You don't want to be known. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a guest on, and I won't name them, who said something that if we aired it, would have gotten them in a lot of trouble. Now, in their defense, what they said was common language where they're from. Okay. And it's not derogatory there.
For sure.
Here, it'd be interpreted as derogatory.
Yeah.
So I sent it back to the management team and said, hey, FYI, this could be perceived really negatively. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to include it, but I just want you to know why I'm cutting this out. And they were grateful for that. And one of the things that I've learned from my podcast is when you treat your guests with respect and you cultivate a space where managers and guests trust you, that's a super important thing. Wow. That's one piece of advice. I'll give you a bunch.
Yeah.
The other one is consistency is so hard, right? Like, I respect you guys for going from weekly to monthly because you admit to yourselves, it's a lot of work.
It is.
And it is. It takes a team. Like, it's not a solo thing, right?
No.
Anybody can just grab a mic, turn on a laptop, and be like, welcome to my podcast, right? But you guys have a setup. It involves time, effort, energy. If I didn't show up today, you set up all of this for nothing.
Yeah.
Right? And now you got to go back to the drawing board.
And it happens. It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it. And I think people just need to be prepared to really understand what goes on behind the scenes. Because it's not just what you see once we hit record. It's everything else that really makes a podcast what it is. So be prepared. It's a long game. It's a slow game. But if you love it, if you believe in whatever the conversations are about, the messaging, then, it won't feel like you're working.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Samir.
Oh, you're very welcome.
That was awesome.
Thank you so
much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Great episode, guys. Check it out if you haven't already. Mm-hmm. And we'll be linking everything together, posting, commenting. Be sure to subscribe, like, follow, do all that stuff. Thanks
You're
for
great,
coming.
guys. Make sure you're doing that.
Same to you. Ciao.